overthinking is very anti-God, because overthinking is relying on your own thoughts, your own predictions, your own forecasts, instead of trusting God. Welcome to These Words Are Rooted, where we talk about life, but God's response to it. We know what culture says, but an even greater question that we should ask ourselves is, what does God say? So my name is Ariana, and thank you so much for joining me this morning, this evening, this afternoon, whatever time of day it is that you are joining. I am just thankful that you are here. In today's episode, we are going to talk about overthinking and how overthinking, it really does steal your joy. So if this is something that you can relate to, keep watching. So I am sure all of you are very familiar with the one and only Tabitha Brown. One of the first things that you're going to notice about Tabitha Brown is her sense of joy. She's a very joyful woman, and I don't even think that you have to know her to be able to pick up on her joy. So there have been a lot of times where I have watched Tabitha Brown's videos, and I'm like, how does this woman have this much joy? Like, is this real? Sometimes for me, when I see very joyful people, I'm like, where does this joy come from? I think it's very common that when you lack something and you see that someone has an abundance of that thing that you lack, you start to feel uncomfortable because your differences they're just too obvious. They just contrast. It's become incredibly obvious to me that I lack joy. I lack joy. That at one point in my life, I was definitely a very joyful person. But since I've gotten older, my joy has it's left me. And so I began to think about, okay, why is it that you find it so hard to be joyful? Where is this coming from? And I have found that a lot of my joy or lack of joy that I have is due to the fact that I am an overthinker. Yeah, I'm a true overthinker. So I want to talk about how overthinking truly steals your joy. And one of the major ways that I can see that it steals your joy is that it literally keeps you in a certain state of mind. There's different places that overthinking takes your mind, and one of the places that it takes you is in the past. Sometimes I'll even rewrite the story in my head, like, oh, if I did this a different way, this is the outcome that I would have gotten if I took a different route. Overthinking also takes you to a false sense of reality. You're like literally in a world that you literally created in your mind. Like you're in a whole different place. Overthinking takes you there. And what I mean by that is when you overthink, at least for me, I tend to create these scenarios in my head based off of things that I've seen, but it's like I'm creating this whole scenario in my head that hasn't even happened yet, right? And so I'm living in this false sense of reality, thinking that something is going to happen when really it might not. I think those are the key places that overthinking takes you is to the past, and it also just takes you inside of a false reality. It's no wonder why when you overthink, you really do lack joy, because you're stuck somewhere that's not real, or you're stuck in a place that has already passed. So in Matthew chapter 6 verse 27, it says, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life?" And so something that we read even throughout the Bible as well is that do not worry is a command. So it's like God commands us not to worry. So let me give you something else too that I hope is helpful as it relates to why it's not good to overthink and how this steals your joy. When you think about the weathermen are always, or weather women, whomever is reporting on the weather. These people are basically looking at certain weather patterns. They're looking at certain weather patterns, whether it be like wind or temperature, what have you. There's a lot of different components that they're looking at to predict what the weather might be. But I think that that's the key, is that they forecast based off of a prediction, right? Because I'm sure you've noticed that sometimes you'll look at your forecast, it'll say that, oh yeah, today it's not going to rain, but then you go outside and it's raining. Or today is going to be sunny, but then you see a lot of clouds. Even though we look to these forecasters as like these reliable sources, they're not perfect because they predict. Anyone who predicts, that already tells you that there's a flaw there, that if you have to predict and forecast, that means that you don't have a perfect knowledge of something. That means that your prediction is going to fail. You're going to get it right numerous times, but you're going to get it wrong as well because you're not perfect. So you're probably wondering, like, girl, how does this relate to overthinking? Okay, just like when you think about like astrologists and fortune tellers, they predict, they forecast, they get it right sometimes, but sometimes they don't. That same mentality of predicting and forecasting is exactly what you do when you overthink. You're predicting, you're forecasting, overthinking, and trusting your overthinking, trusting your predictions, trusting your own forecast. It's like you're living in your own mind, like you're living by your own words. And it's like, it's no wonder why you don't have joy when you overthink, because you're living in something that's so flawed. Overthinking is very anti-God, because overthinking is relying on your own thoughts, your own predictions, your own forecasts, instead of trusting God. And I think that sometimes overthinking can become like this security blanket for us. Sometimes we feel very secure in creating these scenarios in our heads because it kind of feels like we're in control. But if anything, it really does steal your joy. So one little I guess resource I want to leave with you is a video by Jerry Flowers. He taught a sermon that basically was titled, "I Need You to Stop Overthinking." And so I definitely encourage you to watch that video by Jerry Flowers. It's super helpful, especially if you are a person who overthinks. It really does put things in perspective. But I think the biggest thing to realize is that overthinking is definitely a major thief of joy. So there's a lot of things that can come to take away your joy, but overthinking is one of them. I hope that this video was of some encouragement to you, and I also hope to see you the next time.